Look, I broke out the boomer chair just for this. Because there's some crazy stuff going on today in terms of what's happening with the internal combustion engine, the state of the internal combustion engine in 2025. And to somebody like me who's been around for a long time and is an engine guy, it's mind-boggling. I can't wrap my head around the things that have become common occurrences. To understand what I'm talking about, to preface this, we got to take a little trip down history lane, okay? So this is a piston and rod assembly. Obviously, you knew that, right? But now if you were to take this device and you were to transport it back to, let's say, 1880 and introduce this to the pioneers of the internal combustion engine, the horseless carriage, you showed them this thing, they would know exactly what it was. They would know each part of this component. They would know why each part does what it does. They would recognize it because it's what they're working with. It's unchanged. It may be a little taller, or shorter, or longer, or thinner, but it doesn't make any difference. They would know exactly what this is because it has not changed. It has not fundamentally changed since the beginning of the internal combustion engine. There aren't too many other components of the modern engine that you could make that claim about. Like, for instance, a pioneer would recognize valves. They would recognize a camshaft. They would recognize a crankshaft. That's about it. Everything else has changed to be more or less unrecognizable. But through it all, through the last 150 or so years of evolution, there are certain things that have remained constant and have been perfected, and I mean perfected, for a long, long time. So you go from, let's say, the 1880s until the 19-teens, 1920s, gross experimentation, meaning that these guys are just throwing everything they could think of at the wall to see what the best configuration was. You know, all different engine numbering and positioning, but it still stayed the same basic Otto cycle 4-stroke engine, okay? But they were putting cams everywhere, heads everywhere, all different configurations. Then World War II comes along, right? And now the governments and all of the government's resources are involved in perfecting the internal combustion engine. So at that point, during World War II and leading up to World War II, every single thing that we have today that is considered standard on an internal combustion engine was experimented with, worked with, working prototypes, all tested during that World War II period. Right? The countries fighting the war through all sorts of resources because the internal combustion engine was the key to making it all work, whether it's planes, tanks, it didn't make any difference. The war was fought with pistons and rods, okay? So all different types of fuel injection, all different types of ignition systems, all different types of camshaft phasing, and all different experiments, and it was all perfected. And like I said, they worked with everything that we have today, they were working with back then, right? Minus the current computing capabilities, right? That's different. But in terms of the configuration of the internal combustion engine, they had it all worked out. Okay. Now, war is over, 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, constant evolution, making the package that we use, that we drive every day, a little bit better, a little bit more efficient, a little bit more powerful. 1970s, we had a little bump in the road, right? Crazy emissions standards start to pop up, crazy fuel mileage standards start to pop up. It puts a little hurt, there's a little dip in terms of evolution. And then in the 1980s, evolution picks up again. You know, modern engine management systems come into contact with this long perfected primitive device, okay? And we have perfection, okay? And through the 1980s into the 1990s, into the early 2000s, you had engines that, if cared for, would run forever. Commonly 2, 3, 4, 500,000 miles, right? More if you really nurse it along, more if you really take care of it. Engines were perfected. Good fuel mileage, good economy, good everything, good power, reliability, a perfected package. But then a funny thing happened going into the mid-20-teens, 2014, 2015, 2016. The trend started to reverse itself. Now, even though the basics of the internal combustion engine have not changed, and all of this collective knowledge gained from all of these years of experimentation and racing and science and, none of that seems to matter anymore. Because all of a sudden, for the last several years, the manufacturers have been building engines that will not live, that are self-destructing. And this is especially crazy, especially puzzling when you look at names like Toyota, or even better than that, Honda. Because Honda, of all the manufacturers around the world, I would consider Honda to be the most sophisticated, with the most experience, with the most varied. Because remember, Honda, everything from motorcycles to small engines, lawnmowers to Formula One cars, to you name it, Honda's had their hands in it. So for Honda to build engines that are now known to be troublesome, right? Even like Kia and Hyundai, for example, they were never considered to be fantastic. Jake brake. They were never considered to be fantastic engines, but they were the kind of motor that you never gave any thought to, because they would run and they'd run and they'd run, and you get a few 100,000 miles out of it and the car would fall apart around it. The motor would still be good. Not anymore, right? Your Kias and the Hyundais, they dropped out on the side of the road. They had chuck rods. The biggest one that I see lately was that recall, right? The Chevy, the LT motor, it's a successor to the LS, the 6.2. They just recalled, last month they recalled 877,000 of these things, almost a million of these engines, right? Well, pretty much got to be every one that they've built, because they're prone now to catastrophic engine failure out on the road, right? So National Highway Traffic Safety Administration doesn't get involved in just like simple, engine problems, right? They get involved in things that cause safety issues, okay? And the fact that these engines will just be driving down the road and poof, chuck a rod, they got involved. So there's a recall on 877,000 of these things. I watched a teardown on one on a channel called I Do Cars. All right, this guy he has a salvage yard and he tears down engines. It's a great channel. I get a big kick out of it, right? But he tore one of these things down, and he examined each of the components. And yeah, I know there was a lot of carbon around the top of the engine from the direct injection, which is another problem. The manufacturers know that this is a problem, a long-term problem. They don't care. But the direct injection and the carbon buildup around the top of the engine had nothing to do with the damage, because it was clearly oil starvation. It was oil starvation, and it spun the number one rod bearing, and it broke the rod and holed the block. This is a Chevrolet V8. This is a Chevy. This isn't some like off-brand Chinese thing. This is a Chevy V8 and they can't keep them together. How is this even remotely possible? The wet belt engines. So Ford is famous for this, and several other manufacturers are too. But just for the sake of this discussion, Ford, okay, the wet belts. So if you're not familiar, when Ford started with the EcoBoost motors, they incorporated a remote oil pump. So the oil pump is down under the crankshaft. It's like kind of in the oil pan. And they drive it with a rubber belt, a timing belt. It's the same thing as a timing belt. Now, I've been around since I've been a mechanic, since timing belts have been a thing, right? And one of the things you knew way back when was that an oil leak at the front of the engine is certain doom for the timing belt. Timing belts and oil don't get along with each other. I know, supposedly the oil pump drive belts are configured a little bit differently so that they're more oil resistant, but that's besides the point. I've seen these things, I've seen videos of them, I've seen pictures of them after they've been in an engine for less than 100,000 miles, and they're cracked and they're looking like they're ready to fall apart. I would not trust them. Why a wet belt? Why would you drive your oil pump off of a wet belt? That makes no sense at all, okay? Because first off, if you need to have a remote oil pump, you can use a chain. They've been using chains since the beginning of time. The belt is sure to fail. But even more important than that, let's say you're trying to save space at the front of the engine, right? So you're going to drop the oil pump down under it. That's already been done. Back in the 1980s, when engineers were starting to get away from the distributor years, they were going to distributorless ignitions, oil pumps were almost universally driven off the same gear that drove the distributor. So now when that distributor was no longer necessary and the gear was no longer necessary, they started moving the oil pumps to the front snout of the crankshaft. So built into the timing cover at the front of the engine, they had the oil pump. It was foolproof. It was absolutely foolproof. It was the best design yet, okay? Because the oil pump was on a one-to-one relationship with the crankshaft. It took up the least amount of space. It was just there in the timing cover. It was easy to service when necessary. But think about it, an oil pump itself is the best lubricated part of the engine. They very rarely actually go bad. It was the perfect thing. It's unbeatable. So then why would you then remote mount the oil pump like they do on these wet belt engines? Put it down in the oil pan. Think about this for a second, okay? Think about this. The drive assembly, the pulley that drives the belt, is as wide as one of the oil pumps that they use in the timing cover. So by moving it down below the engine, you're not saving any space at all. The oil pump would take up the same exact space that the drive pulley takes up. So what's the point? Why would you do that? There's only one reason I can think of. Why would you not use a chain, or even better than that, why would you not just use this time-proven idea of mounting it directly to the snout of the crankshaft in the timing cover? Only one reason you would do that: planned obsolescence. Okay? You can't get these things. These things have been so perfected for so many years. You can't get them to just fail on their own. They'll keep going and going and going and going and going. Okay? The only reason you would use a wet belt system is because you only want this engine to last X amount of time, and that belt is only going to last X amount of time. So let's just say it's a 100,000 mile change interval on it, and it's probably just about that, give or take. You'll bite the bullet and do it the first time, okay? You're probably not going to bite the bullet and do it the second time, because it's a very involved job, very involved job. There's a lot to disassemble to get to that belt, right? Essentially the whole front of the engine has to come apart. The oil pan and anything under and around the oil pan has to come out. It's a job. Most people will neglect it to the point that it just snaps, or the teeth come off of it, the oil pump stops, and the engine just, that's it, seized, okay? That's the only reason you would do that. There are no benefits in terms of space savings. There are no benefits in terms of more efficient drive. Nothing. The best drive is no drive at all. Stick the oil pump right there on the snout of the crankshaft, and it takes nothing to drive it. Engine failures have become the norm, and it makes no sense at all. No sense at all. All of these manufacturers, General Motors, Honda, Toyota, Kia, Ford, they're all having massive issues with internal engine problems, catastrophic failures. It's a frustrating, especially from an engine guy. I mean, I've always been an engine guy. I love engines, right? Before I even get into that, right, you've got one other thing too. You've got unrebuildable blocks. Okay, so you started off with cast iron blocks, right? And the cast iron formed the cylinder too. You machine it and hone it, and that's it. Piston and rod goes in there and does its thing. Then they went to aluminum blocks with press-in liners. Well, okay, that's good. That'll last, all right? But now they've gone to plating the aluminum cylinder, the aluminum blocks. So all different versions of it. There's the Nicosil, which has been around for a very long time, and it's common on motorcycle engines. But it doesn't hold up the way it should in an automotive application. They have all of these different plating techniques that the various manufacturers are using. But they're sensitive. They're sensitive to extreme heat, extreme load. They're sensitive to fuel quality. They're sensitive to a lot of different things. And so these engines, a lot of these engines, even if they're not having catastrophic failure where there's oil starvation issues or any of these other things that are going wrong with them, you've got literally, in a lot of cases, the cylinder walls just flaking apart. And it's becoming common. They'll get 100, 150,000 miles out of them, 200,000 miles, and that's it. That's it. The plating comes off. And the rings are riding against jagged sections of aluminum. They don't last. And they're not rebuildable. They're not rebuildable, not in any practical way. There's not enough material there to overbore them and drop a liner in, a sleeve like the old days. So basically, you get one of these engines that's got 150,000 miles on it. The days of, cutting it 30 over, 10 over, 20 over, 30 over, 60 over, right? Or just giving it a quick hone, those days are over. You throw it away. They're not rebuildable. Now, you have to ask yourself why this would come about, why the situation would come about just in this period of time, the middle 20 teens, okay, and then persist to today, and actually getting worse today. You have to look at something else that was being done at this same period of time, okay, and that was the push for electrification. Now, I know that's dead. It's over. Right? Everybody's realizing now that was a complete folly. Right? The whole thing was a scam. I feel bad for the people who got sucked into it, but now everybody's reversing course and it's like, yes, back to internal combustion. But is it possible, is it more than just coincidence that these engine failures, these catastrophic engine failures, and these unrebuildable engines, and all of these other almost seemingly deliberate design flaws, right? Problems built into the machine to limit its life or make it exorbitantly expensive to repair or impossible to repair. Is it possible that all of that was done intentionally so that the general public over the next several years would say, I can't, these engines don't last, these cars don't last, these cars suck, but oh look, electric cars, they don't have these problems with engines. They just down the road, right? Is it possible that there's been, on a large-scale corporate level, is it possible that there's been a conspiracy to deliberately handicap the internal combustion engine, make it look bad in comparison to the electric car? I'm not saying that's what happened, right? And I know it seems far-fetched. Now, I'm one of those people I've never met a conspiracy that I didn't look into. And you know what? I've been right about most of them. But that's besides the point. I'm not saying that it is. But what I'm saying is, it sure looks like it. I can't believe they're just coincidentally all in the same basic era. All of these manufacturers from all different parts of the world that are known for building Swiss watch-like engines that will live forever, all of a sudden, they fall apart and they're not rebuildable. They forgot all of the stuff that they learned over the last 130 years, 150 years. All of that's just wiped clean and they can't build an engine that'll stay together. Oh, and at the same time, they're spending billions and billions of dollars with all sorts of government subsidies to finance the electric car movement. Is it a conspiracy? Is it a coincidence? Man, it would be a hell of a coincidence. If it is a conspiracy, it would take a lot of people in on it, to like, I don't know, do they have like a secret society of engine, designers that get together and meet like, by candlelight in some cave someplace and say, yes, now we're not going to let it last a mile past 176,000, right? And do your thing. I don't know. I don't know if that's possible or not. But it sure seems that way, doesn't it? All right, so it's obvious. It's just a known thing now. All of the major manufacturers are having major issues with all of their different engine lines all at once. What does this mean going forward? All right, because one of the reasons why you have to look at stuff like this to pick out trends, and try to position yourself in the right place. What does it mean going forward? What is this going to mean 3 years out, 5 years out, 10 years out? How do you position yourself to benefit from this? Because it's a very bad thing. It's hard to benefit from it. This is how I see it. Just my opinion. Just my opinion. If I was in the used car business, or considering getting into the used car business, I'd be running away. I would be running away. Forget about all of the electronic things that are going on. Forget about all of the insanity when it comes to the complication, the overcomplication of today's cars and the parts, the components that go with them. I just watched a thing, Hoovie's Garage. He had a BMW, a 20-teens BMW, and the diesel and the DEF tank, the diesel exhaust fluid tank went bad. The little plastic tank and the components to make it work cost him $4,000. $4,000, okay? How insane is that? How insane is that? So with examples like that, and we've covered a lot of things like the $4,500 taillight repair and the $44,000 bumper dent on that Rivian, we've talked about these things. With all of those issues, plus now, the transmissions, that's another thing too, but let's save transmissions for another video. With all of those issues, plus now, engine issues, right? I would be running as far away from the used car business as possible because it's not going to be pretty over the next several years. That's number one. Number two, if I was positioning myself into business, how can I profit off of this? I would be looking at investing in, I think the machine shop is going to make a comeback. I'm almost certain of it. The machine shop that was once like every town had a machine shop. It was like the cornerstone of local industry, local business. I think the machine shop is going to make a comeback. And I think things like being able to respray cylinders, to refinish cylinders on engine blocks that otherwise couldn't be, rebuilt, I think that's going to be a business. Fixing holes in block like that 6.2 that was on I Do Cars. Nice big window in the block. Us race car guys have been fixing windows, holes in blocks forever, okay? But it's not a commonly done thing in regular, automotive repair or regular machine shop. That's something I would be looking into. Block repair, block reconditioning, reconfiguring, whatever it happened to be, that's going to be a thing. And crankshafts, being able to cut and polish crankshafts because oil starvation issues. There's 877,000 of these 6.2s out there that are going to eat their crankshafts. This could be a growth industry, as well as engine swaps. Because now, okay, you've got the psychos at the EPA. All of that is finally being reined in to make the laws a little bit more reasonable. So the idea of doing engine swaps in earlier and more reliable engines, LSs and so on and so forth, into these more trouble-prone cars to replace these more trouble-prone engines, that actually looks like it may be a realistic business going down the road. I know for certain that repowering electric vehicles, taking the body, the interior, all of the stuff, and then plopping it down onto a conventional chassis with an axle, a transmission, and an engine. I know that's going to be a thing. There's no question about it. Not yet. It's coming. But seeing these trends and the way that they're going, there are opportunities out there. Some people who get in early are going to make a lot of money fixing these problems that are being sent out into the public. I feel bad for people that rely on secondhand vehicles. Lower income people, they have no choice. They can only afford to buy $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 car. Unfortunately, their supply of reliable cars is going to dry up. It's already drying up. It's been drying up, but it's soon going to become non-existent. Honestly, I feel bad. Now, on the flip side, I did a video on future collector cars, and based on this trend and the fact that it's starting to seep into the public consciousness that modern cars are too complicated, too expensive to repair, and too fragile, under certain circumstances, it's becoming common knowledge among the general population, the normies, that older cars were better. And because of that, you're going to see the values start to really go up on things. Cars that were built, let's say, in the 1990s, the early 2000s, the last of the old technology, when they were bulletproof, when they would run for 500,000 miles with just basic maintenance. Those are the cars that are going to skyrocket in value. You're going to see The higher end classic muscle cars and stuff will still always be desirable. But you're going to see things like Chevy Astro vans take the same place in the collector market, like fill that same niche as, let's say, 383 Roadrunners and 396 Chevelles. Cars, vehicles of that survivability, usable, survivable, have a reputation, and very important, they have a reputation for being long lasting and reliable. Those cars are going to start to skyrocket in value, and I would be positioning myself there. I mean, there's a lot to talk about with this. I just wanted to touch on the subject, and I've already gone further than I wanted to with it. But it's something to think about, and it's a situation that is obvious now. Like, it's been creeping up, and I watch out of the periphery. I'm not involved in the new car world, but I watch because I'm part of the world, right? But it's gone beyond just like, they built a bad one or they built a weak one. Going back to the days like the Chevy Vega, with the silicone cylinders and the North Star with the porous engine block. Yeah, there's always been turds. There's always been engines that weren't rebuildable, the old 301 Pontiacs. There's always been turds. But now, rather than them being the exception, they're the rule. And the world is changing. Now, how are you going to make money with it? We're going to do more on this. I'll see you tomorrow.